M. Night Shyamalan is a cinema genius. Yes, he's made a few mistakes in his career, but the man knows what he's doing most of the time. One of Shyamalan's greatest achievements is his creation of a superhero universe that has been given the brilliant name the Israel 177 trilogy. Spoiler warning, this video will include the reveals and the twists in 3 of the movies and more. The trilogy starts with Unbreakable, as we meet David Dunn, or the Overseer, played by Bruce Willis, as he discovers his powers and meets his arch-nemesis, Mr. Glass, played by Samuel L. Jackson. Mr. Glass in the beginning of the film is kind of the man in the chair at first, helping him learn his powers and how Dunn can be a superhero. In other superhero movies, the man in the chair would classify as Ned in Spider-Man Homecoming or Freddy in Shazam. Mr. Glass is set up as a man who can help David, but the twist of the movie is that Mr. Glass is the man who is behind all these terrorist attacks. The man who blew up the train David discovered his powers on. And this is where the trilogy's title of the Israel 177 comes in, as the train that David was on in the beginning of the film was the Israel 177, which set not just Unbreakable's story into play, but Split's and Glass's story. This train accident is what connects the 3 characters. This is later explained in the 3rd movie, Glass. The thing is, though, Mr. Glass, although his methods of finding and creating superheroes are psychotic and completely unorthodox, he doesn't see himself as the bad guy, or the good guy. He sees himself as just a man, looking for belonging. He just wanted to know that he had meaning. As he puts it in the film,
I have something called osteogenesis imperfecta. It's a genetic disorder. I don't make a particular protein very well, and it makes my bones very low in density, very easy to break. I've had 54 breaks in my life, and I have the tamest version of this disorder. Type 1. There are type 2, type 3, type 4. Type 4s don't last very long. So that's how it popped into my head. If there's someone like me in the world, and I'm at one end of the spectrum, couldn't there be someone else, opposite of me at the other end? Someone who doesn't get sick, doesn't get hurt like the rest of us. And he probably doesn't even know it. The kind of person these stories are about. A person put here to protect the rest of us, to guard us.
Glass is then arrested at the end of the movie for his crimes. One of the most interesting things about Glass's character is his connection and fascination with comic books. The very first scene we meet Glass is when he's a child and is given a comic book for his birthday. We then see him as a comic art dealer. He's selling art to a man who plans on giving it to his son, but Glass informs him that this isn't just decoration, it's art. It's a vital part of the history of man. This is expanded upon in the 3rd movie, Glass. We can tell these comics are important to him. Then, 17 years later, we see an all-new character, Kevin Windlecrum, played by James McAvoy in Split. In this, we meet a young girl named Casey, with really bad home problems I'd prefer not to get into, as her and 2 other young girls are kidnapped by Kevin's other personalities. Then the rest of the film is then pretty much the character development for Casey and Kevin, until the biggest twist in all of M. Night Shyamalan's films, the reveal that David Dunn at the end of Split, recognizing that these 2 movies, Unbreakable and Split, are connected in a shared universe. When I first saw Split, this blew my mind, and it got me excited for whatever was coming next. It was then announced that production on the 3rd movie, Glass, had begun. The movie had mixed reviews, as most of its audience members didn't like the ending and expected a bit more from a movie that was supposed to have such a epic conclusion. I love the ending of the film. I think there was no better way to end it. We first meet David, continuing his vigilante acts with his new man in the chair, Joseph, who is his son. And we continue to see Kevin's personalities kidnapping more young women. The 2 fight, getting themselves caught by a secret government organization. The rest of the time in the film, we see three main characters imprisoned, being studied, and evaluated for a psychological condition. The doctor evaluating them, played by Sarah Paulson, tries to convince them their powers aren't real and can all be explained in practical ways. This idea in the movie sums up pretty much all of its themes, from the religious commentary all the way through the most obvious one, the one I want to talk about today. The themes that comic books are not accurate or appropriate forms of literature. In the end of the film is that all three of our main characters die. This is why I think most people were disappointed with its ending. It was just a bit too shocking for a conclusion. It didn't go anywhere near what we expected or wanted. Then this creates suspense for a big twist. The most important one. The twist is the reveal that the entire fight in the end was recorded secretly by Mr. Glass, so we can show the rest of the world that superheroes and supervillains do exist. Throughout most of the film, everybody keeps saying that this is the end of a story. That most big comic book endings take place somewhere big, which in the movie is the opening of the city's biggest skyscraper. But then, when the world sees these are characters in action, the rest of the world realizes that supers are real, and they are among them. It's then implied that this isn't the end, it's only the very start. So, instead of Glass being the conclusion that we wanted, it's the origin story to a start of other stories to be expanded on. This trilogy is set up to be an origin story to a new universe of supers. Most comic books, the origin story or the setup to a comic storyline are set up in 0 issues. That's why I refer to these movies as the 0-issue trilogy. It's only setting up the story for future movies/issues to come. But I will say, if M. Night ends his universe here, I will be sorely, sorely disappointed. Anyway, the theme I want to discuss, as I mentioned earlier, is the argument of comic books. The psychiatrist believes that comic books are not history books. They do not symbolize the progression of mankind. On the other hand, Mr. Glass begs to differ. And I have to agree with Glass on this one. Comic books are a reflection of mankind, especially when talking about history. During the Cold War, Superman was one of the biggest influences on Americans. He was the embodiment of truth, justice, and the American way. In the 40s, Superman was used to demonstrate the power of atomic nuclear weapons and used in World War II. Then, towards the end of the Cold War, in 1987, the movie Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, was a giant propaganda film about the effects of nuclear weapons. Even dating back to when comic books first came out, Superman's introduction was supposed to represent different kinds of people and acts. The underwear on the outside of Superman representing strongman. The costumes are a reflection of society. In superhero cinema, the movies took a drastic change after 9/11. Instead of being super corny and comic booky like Spider-Man or Joel Schumacher's Batman films, they turned into The Dark Knight. They were dark and gritty. As society changed, so did superheroes. Superheroes are a representation of whatever era and state our current country is in. It also helps that the very thing in Unbreakable that we see are a bunch of facts talking about comic books. This just drives it home that these movies are not necessarily about the characters, but the comics themselves, and recognizing them as a true form of literature. We also see in the film all the supporting characters refer to our main characters' roles within the comics. David Dunn, the reluctant hero, Mr. Glass, the mastermind, the Beast, the anarchist. The comics aren't just a representation of society, but to the individual themselves. This was Stanley's whole thing when it came to writing relatable characters. He told the story of a family that went on trips, except they go to other dimensions and they have superpowers. Stan the Man told the story of a teenage kid who's struggling with having a social life, keeping up in school, and having multiple jobs, while fighting crime. And hiding his identity, of course. He told stories of a man who just wants to do the right thing, and a moral belief that everything is black and white. But when he's woken up in a world that's no longer black and white, but gray. Glass is probably the best telling of a Greek tragedy in the modern world. It has almost all the elements of one. First off, almost everyone dies, obviously. But we also have the antagonist, played by Sarah Paulson. The three witches probably are supporting cast characters like Casey, Dunn's son, or Mr. Glass's mother. The fact that this trilogy not only is a giant Greek tragedy, depicts a representation of modern society. And argues that comic books are a vital, accurate, and appropriate form of literature. This should show you how important comic books are to society. That they are appropriate enough to be considered literature next to works of art like Animal Farm or Sherlock Holmes. Those books depict accurate setting of life in the book's setting. That's one reason that makes both film and TV show adaptations of Sherlock Holmes work. They follow the same ideas as the book, telling the adventures of in a specific time in London, and how his adventures are influenced based on society. Plus, both books are works of fiction, so who cares if a comic book is about a blind lawyer who fights crime? Ninjas isn't realistic. His story is still one with real emotions and themes, just as Animal Farm is. It has talking animals, yet it's about revolutions and community. Comics are crazy, fun, colorful. They have pictures, but those pictures make the storytelling easier and allows you to connect with them through ways you'd be surprised by, like how Spider-Man is red and most of his foes are green. It's done on purpose. Red and green are contrasting colors on the color wheel. It makes Spider-Man stand out as the hero amongst his green-colored rogues gallery. Comics and books are one and the same. That's why they're called comic books. Duh. Glass is a film of many themes and many areas of symbolism, but it's done well. Every time you watch it, it's like a new layer of a beautiful onion being revealed. This movie is a bit like The World's End in the way it uses its themes. It can be confusing at times because there are all these messages in the film, but you can't see them all due to the fact that there's so many. And each message isn't the main moral of the story. It just adds on, and it just makes it that much better. As I'm writing this script, I just keep finding more, you know? There's new topics to talk about. There's new evidence that he references. There's so much to talk about in this film because of how many themes it has. His take on realistic superheroes is interesting. Other projects that go for a similar idea of what if superheroes were in our world go about it differently. Kick-Ass tells a story of realistic superheroes. They may not have powers, but they still fight crime. And that's what superheroes may look like in a realistic situation. Then you have shows like The Boys that show how the rest of society would react to these gods among men, and how these supers may not be as good as we think. But Glass shows you what a realistic person with extraordinary abilities would act like. You would doubt it like Kevin does. You'd want recognition like Glass. You'd want to feel conflicted like David. That's probably why so many people can connect with these films, even if they are comic book fans or they aren't. These characters are so human-like that we can relate to them. Anyone can pull their own themes that they think they see in the story. This just makes the beautiful onion even more gorgeous. This is probably a better topic for another day. It's oddly brilliant and just a genius story. A story that M. Night wanted to tell. A story that he thought needed to be told. This is his commentary on our world and how he views it. He expresses these thoughts through all of the symbolism and themes of the film. All the way from religion, comic books as literature, societal issues. Glass is a very deep film and had so many symbolic references in it that I could make an entire essay series on each topic that he touches on in this trilogy. But in the end, that's exactly what he did. He told his story. I don't know. Maybe I'm spewing forth a bunch of mumbo jumbo. You tell me your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure to like, make sure to share, make sure to subscribe. Also, if you haven't seen these films, I highly recommend checking them out. They are classics. The East Rail 177 trilogy, is definitely my second favorite trilogy after the Blood and Ice Cream trilogy, also known as the Cornetto trilogy. But again, that's another topic for another day. Peace out.